Alright, hello. Welcome back to the, second part, I'm going to call this, of the previews of ESL Pro League Season 18. We're doing groups C and D this time, after having done A and B a couple weeks ago, just before those groups started. And yeah, it's been an interesting one. Group A went pretty well for me. I ended up getting 4 out of 6 points, something like that. It was pretty nice, because most of my picks were from that Group A, like especially my favourites. Now we're looking at Group B, about to wrap up. Yumi's not doing too badly. I think he's already got 3 teams qualified, which is a nice tally so far. I'm personally a bit surprised with Big playing so well.
Yeah,
but yeah, just needs Heroic to pull it back against Monty, which is going on as we talk. And yeah, looking set for a matching of my sort of points. So it's going to come down to these groups, I think, should that come through. So a lot to play for. I wonder, really, what these groups are going to look like come the end of it, because we complained about Group A and B extensively, looking a bit weak, looking a bit soft. And then you look at Group C and you're like, oh, things are not getting better. I think Group D does kind of save it, but Group C, I don't know about you, Yumi, to me it looks horrible.
Yeah, I did kind of struggle, when we've obviously picked ahead of this video, but I did kind of struggle making selections because I kind of felt the same way as Group A, where you were snagging a lot of like the good teams out of that group, and I was just like left with I don't know who. And I think regardless of who I picked, none of them would have qualified because, like I said, you snag all the good team. But yeah, it is quite hard to make arguments for a lot of the teams in Group C, and so
yeah, it's not fun. Like, once you get beyond like a favorite or two, there's like 2 teams like, yeah, they're good favorites, and after that you've got to pick another one. You're like, oh, yeah, not like the look of that. Not looking like look at that at all. But let's start with the real positives. I picked first this time, and my first favorite, I went with, I think, a pretty solid choice, all things considered. I went with G2. Now, we all know the story with G2. You know, they've got Nico, they've got Hunter, they've got Munacy, they've got JKS, they've got a stacked roster, they've got an IGL who is still kind of being debated. Is he great? Is he just got a great team? What's actually up with HooXi? I'm still on the side that he's solid, but nothing truly special, especially considering his lack of experience, which I think is a big deal for IGLs. And yeah, we're still looking at the same roster that's just going to out-frag you. They came 3rd to 4th at Gamers 8, I think it's called, but they lost to Vitality in the semi-final. Fair enough. One of the other 2 or 3 best teams in the world right now. Won Cologne just before that. I'm liking this pick. I think they should. Getting out of groups is a given for this kind of roster. And yeah, I feel like this is my first lock of this event. Like, there's no way this fails.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I think G2, in this, I do kind of agree with the argument about whether or not HooXi is good, but he's definitely done a better job than Alexi B, who definitely had a better rapport with this G2 roster. And I think it's hard to deny that G2 hasn't improved under HooXi's leadership, whether that's him actually as a strategic in-game leader, or whether it's just how well he gels with the team and, sort of meets their needs. I feel like he probably is more on that latter end, just allowing players to kind of do what they want, but within the confines of what he believes to be the right play at certain moments. I think he is surrounded by great players. I don't think his position is safe, but G2 as an organization, as a team, have definitely struck a nice balance over this year. They've won some events. They've been contenders in quite a few of them. And yeah, I mean, you've got so many sort of MVP candidates if G2 ever win an event that it's kind of hard to go wrong with.
Yeah, true. There's so many different ways they can beat you, in terms of individuals at least. So it's tough to play against them, especially. I think one of the big parts of the debate when it comes to HooXi, though, is the players on the roster. There's more than just the IGL changing. This was always the issue when you were talking about the next Alexi B comparison. Now we're talking about Alexi B to HooXi comparison. It's not just the IGL changing. And I always think that's especially when we went from Nexa to Alexi B, because we went from a roster that was in dire need of repairs to looking actually fairly solid. Even before the JKS edition, when it was still Jax, but they brought in Munacy. That was a big hole for them, was the AWP. I think that was always a part that like muddied the waters of that conversation. So maybe that JKS involvement, maybe that has helped. Maybe he plays some roles that Jax wasn't as comfortable with, plays them at a higher level. That's been a big aid, because I'd like to give all the credit to HooXi. I was a big fan of his when he was on Copenhagen Flames. I defended the move. But maybe there is other factors that kind of make it murky. Kind of makes it hard to really know.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. I was never really a defender. You know, I was definitely a doubter. I thought immediately they were bringing him as a stopgap, but I've been pleasantly surprised. I think he definitely received more hate than he should have, but at the same
Who doesn't?
time, there's a lot of in-game leaders that are going to take that flack. You know, it's
Mhm.
basically like, oh, you're surrounded by great players. You're not putting up numbers that are even like vaguely comparable to someone in the pro scene. That's that's always going to be a disappointment. And unfortunately, one of the teams that I've selected is kind of in that same camp at the moment because we can move away from G2, I think.
Yep.
And one of the teams I selected, I'm gonna sort of skip the ordering of how I selected them, but I've gone with FaZe, who are in a very similar
Okay.
boat where surrounded by great players. Karrigan as an in-game leader doesn't really do a lot in terms of fragging in the server. You'll come up with these great pocket calls, but this is a team that has so much star power that the group stage shouldn't be really much of a problem for them, especially Group C, which I think is a weaker field. There are a few matches where there could be some upsets. Like I think if they go up against a Fnatic or an Apeks later on, they could see some issues. But by the time they're facing Apeks, they're already through the groups. Or if they face Navi, for example, they're already through the groups. I think this team will be fine on the side of the bracket that they're on. Um, I think that they're a very adaptable team, almost to a fault, which I think is one of their weaknesses. They know how good that they are at sort of assessing what they should do in a game, but it often comes a little too late. Like I almost feel like there isn't a proper game plan going into the games. They always feel things out, and sometimes even if they know what the right move is, you know, every good move that you call will have maybe a 60%, 70% chance of actually succeeding in those moments. And it's those margins where even if they come up with a creative solution or the right solution, it's not always going to pan out for them. And I think we've actually seen them struggle in tournaments because they rely on that so heavily to actually bring them through games.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you can find the right idea, have the right plan, but you've got to shoot heads at the same time, and that's always a slight element of variability. So yeah, when they were great, they were winning close games, all that stuff was very nice, but yeah, I think we've seen a little bit of the other side of that coin of late, and that's why they are struggling. I think they haven't won an event in a while, and yeah, they've top three, I think, at last Premier Full Groups is the last thing that would count as like topping an event. So it'd be nice for them to have a bounce back. I think here they want to be aiming at least top four. I know it's going to be kind of tough because it can be brutal at times, the Pro League playoff bracket, because you're either having to go through this massive run or you're facing this team. You're coming in cold after 2 weeks off, and then this team that's just gone smashing through. Everyone's coming to you with all this momentum. Like it can be kind of tough at times to play the Pro League sort of format. So it'll be interesting to see how they actually perform this time.
Yeah, I think it's also important for people to recognize that FaZe as an organization currently have like a very plummeting stock price. So moving into CS2, you want to see organizations stick around and continue investment. There's actually a possibility in the near future where FaZe, start to revoke some of their teams that they have, even if they're world-class teams. They might actually hold some of these guys in contract and hope that, CS2 rocks around, even though this squad will likely want to stay together. They might just not be, competing under the FaZe banner during a period and may not even be allowed to play tournaments if FaZe do decide that their esports division isn't making enough money because they're very, very much a content fixated organization. They make these big brand deals with like celebrities and the sort, and the fact that their stock price has plummeted so hard, I'm not a full doomer about it, but I do think there is an angle here where there is a little uncertainty about whether this organization has continued longevity moving across into Counter-Strike 2. So I'm a little worried on that front for this team because I think they do still have the potential to be great. I think Karrigan's even said himself like Shui's a very prospective in-game leader, and the way he's performed with Mals after such a short period with younger players that don't have the same rapport is already quite commendable, and actually just further solidifies Shui as one for the future, even moving into the new game. So there are angles in which this FaZe clan could continue to develop. Karrigan could maybe even act as a tutor to Shui in some kind of future that we live in. But
yeah, especially if they don't
yeah.
have a coach, right? Like long term, if you bring in Sue, move Karrigan over to that coach role, I mean, we know he's a great motivator, a great leader in that sense. I think that'd be a pretty good fit. But yeah, it'll be tough to find out. We won't know exactly what kind of FaZe we have until they start playing. They could sweep through this group. They could struggle to make it past some of these less intimidating teams. I don't think 9Z, their opening matchup, will be much of an issue. I don't have much faith in that roster to do anything beyond maybe make Mirage tight if they can get to that map, that sort of thing. But I don't have much faith in them doing much else. But yeah, maybe Fnatic will give them a run for their money. perhaps in the deciding game we'll see some weakness if they have to come in against a really hot and on form Navi, because we know that roster's got potency. Which brings me into my obviously second pick. I've taken Navi as a favourite, the opposite side of the bracket, to FaZe, and they're a weird team to evaluate right now. I think they have always been the team everyone said needs the most time coming out of this latest set of roster moves, because they really smashed together pieces from all over. They brought in Imma, they brought in Lexi B, they brought in JL. These are players who really are going to need a lot of time to mesh, and we've seen some of that struggle so far. I think, sure, some of their losses they're not that bad. Like losing to Astralis at Cologne. Astralis were playing amazing. Losing to Mouse, again, Mouse have been solid. But they've also picked up some wins. When it's worked, it's really worked. They have beaten FaZe. They have gotten some impressive W's. So, Navi, kind of hard to get your head around. I think long term, if they really focus on this project, keep it stable, and keep it together going to CS2, they have the potential to go and build a dynasty. It's just, will an esports team really have that kind of patience? Because this is going to take a lot of time, and even if they're going to make it out of groups here, this is not really the discussion, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Making a deep run is more the problem. If they can't make that happen, I hope the team has the patience to stick with it, because this is a roster with so much potential, but so many things to iron out first.
I think there's a lot of worrying signs with Navi from the point of, I think when Alexi was announced, there was like an interview with Simple where he's saying like, I didn't request him. I didn't ask for Alexi. And they're sort of gambling. They gambled a bit by picking up Imma, who definitely overperformed versus expectations at the major. Was like the highest rated player at that event, and he was honestly on fire. But that was a life tournament from him. That I think it's going to be hard to replicate, even moving forward. And I actually do believe the angle of them maybe even creating a dynasty in CS2, because I actually have a lot of faith in Alexi to be a creative in-game leader, to come up with new ways to exploit all the new util or some of the changes to the maps in a way that other in-game leaders are not going to be as willing to sort of dawn on. I feel like a lot of them are just going to try and go 1-for-1 CSGO tactics to CS2. And I actually do think there's a chance that Alexi becomes the best in-game leader for a period in Counter-Strike 2. At least, I'm thinking about like opening 4 to 6 months, that first season. I think he'll do a great job. But that does rely on, players like Imma, or even Simple for that matter, performing to the standard that you're kind of expecting from this roster. Because Simple has had a dip in performance. He's had a dip in form. I think, it seems a little strange to just look at, his streams, for example, but he seems pretty agitated when he streams. There were periods where when he was playing, he just felt like looked like he was having a great time all the time. But
right.
I do worry for him moving into CS2, because he seems to have quite a lot of gripes with the game, which I don't think he's alone in his gripes. So if Simple doesn't bounce back in CS2 and Imma's not able to even have a couple breakout events here or there, I think this roster will maybe see a bit of tweaking even in that transition to Counter-Strike 2.
It'll be interesting to kind of contrast and compare, because if you look back at the 1.6 to go / source to go for those French players, there was some players who complained a lot about the game, were resistant to it, still end up being fine initially, especially. I think you saw, the Swedes immediately picked it up. I think, as we all remember famously, NIP went and dominated early. Forest and Gitra had no problem transitioning over, but even like the Poles of Virtus Pro, they ended up being Virtus Pro, they won at the time, they initially were one of the teams who really refused to go and transition over. Same thing with Navi, but yet you still had like great seasons early on from like Markelov. Like he still had a prime year left in him in Global Offensive at the start. So I think even if we're seeing a Simple who is just a really good AWPer, I think the rest of this roster's construction and the talent available probably we'll still see them towards the top. It just won't be a Simple carry show that we're used to, right? It won't be that sort of Navi that we've really become accustomed to over the years.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally reasonable.
But yeah, okay, so second favorite pick, who have you gone with?
So I'll reel it right back into Group D. You chose someone on the opposite side of the bracket in Group C, and I've gone with Cloud9 on the other side of the bracket of G2. Now, Cloud9, I do have some problems with them, but I do think that they've just got such world-class players in a full Russian-speaking team. Sure, the systems are completely different, and I think we've already seen some signs of the weakness between what the Navi players would have been expected moving into the Cloud9 trio. They definitely still feel a bit Cloud9-esque. You know, I thought we would see a harsher transition in terms of the tactics these guys decide to employ, especially on T sides. But with that said, you know, you have Electronic, Axile, Shiro. These guys can take over games, and they're not going to have a tough time in these opening games. I think the fact that they made such a deep run at Cologne, even without Axile for the most part, was honestly quite astonishing to see them perform as well as they did. And it's actually been Axile that's maybe seen a little bit of a struggle in terms of remaining consistent as that sort of peak top 5 rifler that we saw last year.
Yeah, being the best, the second best, like a top rifler in the world, it's generally difficult for players to do for an extended period of time. That's part of what makes NiKo a realistic GOAT candidate. Like, it's not a ridiculous claim to make, because just being a top level rifler is supremely difficult. We got 2 years of Cold Zero, we got 8 months of Hobbit. Like, these are sort of things that players really struggle to do. I think if we even see, we don't need to see 100% of Axel. We need to see, with this roster, with the new talent that's in, potentially better system, as you mentioned. We didn't see that much change, as much as we'd like to have seen change. I think we just need a very, very good Axel. We don't need the best version of Axel. The best version of Axel makes this team almost unbeatable, because Shiro hasn't dropped off. Shiro's still Shiro. He's still one of the 3 or 4 most impactful players on any server, especially since he's stepped up his game and become slightly more aggressive. So I think we've really got a dangerous team on our hands. The problem I have is, that series against Ents, that they lost at Gamers 8. Sure, it's Gamers 8. Maybe they didn't take it as seriously as they should have. Maybe they treated it more like a hot holiday with some Counter-Strike involved. But it was an awful game. I know I love Ents. I think they're amongst the sort of 3 or 4 teams competing for tournaments right now. They're really peaking. But they got single digits in both those maps. That's just not good enough. Even for a new roster, you should be able to fight your way to 10 against a team who don't outclass you on any individual level. So I was bitterly disappointed in that series. But I think still Cloud9, Russian super team, expected to be amongst the contenders. They're one of the rosters where you look at and you think, on paper, we've gone from having, people called it a weak era. We've seen a sort of consolidation of talent. And this is a part of it. This Cloud9 roster is a part of that consolidation of talent that really should lead to a highly competitive, top-heavy scene. Just waiting for them to figure it out, and then we'll be there. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah, I think if down the road Cloud9 don't actually see success with this 5-man roster, it won't be the players that change. I'd be very surprised if any of the 5 are pulled out, unless you're making some kind of move like, I don't know, you're angling for Donk or something. You're angling for one of these prospective top riflers, and maybe someone that goes, or Perfecto even is someone that goes, in favor of bringing someone in that's more aggressive, and you'll maybe see role swaps. But I don't think this 5 will change. I don't think they'll take that gamble. The biggest move that they could probably make is bringing in an analytical coach or some kind of analyst that can help boost the structure for this team, because that seems to be the glaring issue, is that a lot of people flamed the hell out of NAVI for the structure, but the fact that there hasn't been much of a structural change just adds more credence to the idea that it's not just NAVI that was the reason that they played the way that they did.
Yeah, we said this. We brought this up. If the structure doesn't change, clearly Groove just has been skating on by without getting properly hammered for this sort of thing, because no one really suggests Groove's the problem. It's always NAVI. NAVI is, it's his system, it's his ideas, it's his calling. This is the issue. If Groove is implementing the system fully willingly, and he's just allowing them to keep doing this weird thing where they're doing 1 main caller, 2 side callers who are allowing for this incredibly one-on-one focused game, you've got to change Groove. Someone's got to come in and put their foot down. That's got to change.
You need someone to discipline this team effectively, if that's the way that they prefer to play.
I mean, someone just give Maui Snake some Russian lessons and let him loose. Like, he'll go in
All
there.
right, first lesson, boys. We're gonna use flashbangs on the hit straight away, not just to take map control. We're using them on the hit.
We're using them everywhere.
Yeah.
You're buying 2 each. None of this one of each nade nonsense. Double flashbangs on everyone. We're getting those numbers up. Pump those numbers up. We're playing Moneyball.
Yep, and he'll throw in a nunchuck routine while he's at it.
Oh man, the motivational nunchuck routine. In
I'll
Russia,
get him going.
I'll pay endless amounts of money to see that. Please, someone leak it if it ever happens for whatever reason. But no, it would be fascinating to see because we've talked about. I'm not sure we've talked about it on the show, but I'm sure we've talked about it personally. The Bet Boom roster that NAVI's assembled has qualified for IM Sydney and has looked fairly potent. Like, it's pretty obvious on paper this is a roster that kind of slaps in places. Like, not everyone's a killer. Who the hell is Danists? But Zorte, we all know, can absolutely slap. Chiron is a beast when you put him in the right situations. I think it was a too many chefs type of deal when he was on Virtus Pro. Like, how many aggressive playmaking riflers did you need? 3 was too many. Clearly too many. But on this roster, he's been allowed to flourish. He's actually putting up good numbers, like very impactful. Siren, numbers great. I'm still not convinced in his talent, but hey, if he fits in the system, can get these sorts of fragging numbers up, go nuts. So overall, that roster looks really potent. So if we see them play each other in Sydney and NAVI wins,
dude,
the forums, the tweets, it's going to hell. I think, NAVI gets to flex. He should just post endless videos like, Tate style, where it's him sunglasses, cigar, just like burning up like a picture of Maui Snake, like doing all this shit because he gets.
They
to
tried
talk.
To cancel me. They couldn't.
Exactly.
They couldn't do it. They couldn't deplatform me.
They couldn't cancel NAVI. Should this come to pass?
Yes.
Before we get overexcited. And start
I think that would be
trash.
quite funny. I think as well. Like the funny thing for me was that they actually did executes on Bet Boom, which is the thing that I think was kind of an odd stick out for the Cloud9 teams, that they just basically never did executes. But they seem to have thrown in a few. It's still a very loose play style on this Bet Boom team, but they're also a brand new team, so that's actually kind of expected to a certain degree.
It is, yeah.
Like, everybody's come from different cultures and different walks of life with the previous experience that they have. So it's not like someone can forefront it by having a duo in this team or a trio that know everything and brings everybody else up to speed. So I'm kind of here for the revenge arc.
Yeah.
I'm here for the revenge arc.
Oh, that'd be great. I hope Cloud9 end up being a good team. But yeah, if otherwise, this would be an amazing alternative. I'm all up for it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's kind of Cloud9. I'm going to close off the favorites with. It was tough finding a third favorite, and I think you picked the best third favorite before picking a third favorite or something. I don't know. I made the mistake of going for an underdog pick because I really wanted to secure one of my underdogs first. So I've ended up with Liquid, and I still want to defend this team. I still want to root for this roster because I love the idea that they just went, yo, Yakindo, who are your tier 2 buddies? Let's bring them in and see if it works. I still think they're solid moves in terms of, like, on paper, these guys play the right sort of roles. Sure, they overlap, but they play roles, quite specific roles. They'll fit into a team. They're pretty skilled individuals. Let's see if we can make it work. And so far, it's been a minor catastrophe, which hasn't been great for me and my mental health, because they were only able to beat Big in the Cologne play-in, not the event, play-in. They were only able to beat Big in 3 maps. Then they lost to 9. They lost to Astralis in the best of 1. It's just been a rough time. But I think this is a kind of situation where they can build on something. They can play a lot of maps over the course of this group stage, because I don't expect them to go flawless. I expect them to have a close game against Virtus Pro. I'm saying they'll win it, just because I've picked them. My money's going on Virtus Pro. I think they'll get 3 maps of practice in there. They'll go to the lower bracket, face someone like Lynn Vision, Eternal Fire. I think someone they can beat, but again, you get to feel your team out a bit more. Because a lot of these guys are not very experienced. Like Patsy spent a lot of time in Spirit, but Spirit were never a consistent tier 1 team. They don't have the slots. They didn't have that kind of money. They weren't able to pay the silver price, for their top ranking. It was all iron for them, and that's rough in the modern CSGO scene. And then Rainwaker, I mean, it's even worse. He was playing on 500, who before that were Skada, who were just nobody. So they were winning they made more prize money than a lot of tier 1 teams over the last 2 years of just online cups. That's very different to LAN play. So there's still a lot to work out for this team. Every, I think, boot camp they get better. Every LAN event they play, they'll get better. Rough start. They're still talented. This is an event where we see a much improved Liquid.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I think NAF has seen a more of a star role kind of position as well. It feels like he's one of the shining lights in this team, even though they've had a few of these bumps on their road. We haven't seen good production out of players like OC. There's some of the struggles as well, like you said, in terms of just like adapting play styles for some of the other guys on this team. And they're clearly trying to put together a system that works. I'm still on the fence. They obviously took a big gamble and defaulted the top team in North America to being their closest competitor.
Yeah, come RMR time, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think they're in a really rough spot where if they don't see improvement very rapidly, like that RMR is going to be incredibly difficult. I think there are other teams that are going to leap over them just as quickly. Like even the likes of Spirit, like you're saying, they're usually not able to sort of pay their way through. Like they'll be a contender team that Liquid will probably have to face off in some capacity because of the way seeding will end up working. So
yeah,
I think there's a lot of different angles with this team, but yeah, no, I do remain hopeful. I think there's just they've got really, really solid riflers with a lot of potential, but it's about amassing that properly. And yeah, I just haven't seen too much of it yet, which is
it's not too promising. And when you look back at the NA RMR, you think all it would take would be swapping out one of these guys for an NA player, and we're back in the easy RMR. We don't have to be in this EU one. If this doesn't work out, because CS2 what the majors in April, May?
I think it might be earlier than that. I think that'd be open. It might be like open quals and things like that beforehand. I know they announced the dates, but
so maybe it won't be the first the CS2 major that they can do this for. But if things haven't figured out and they want to get back in the easier side of things, I'm not saying there's great options in NA, but it's a lot easier to get it to the major when you have, pick one, Automatic from Evil Geniuses. You slip him in instead of probably Patsy. Oh man, actually, no, I'd like him instead of Rainwaker, actually. Instead of Rainwaker, if things haven't worked out, get back in the NA, like, easy games. Get yourself that sticker money. That might be an option they'll look into, because in EU, this is going to be rough. If BetBoom are good, Spirit are good, on top of all those annoying EU Tier 2 teams, like the former Heat roster, the Bulgarians, what are they? TSM looking not too terrible. Mm-hmm. These are rough teams to have to face in like open qualies and all these sorts of little things with no stage, no crowd, none of this pressure that you usually use to separate good teams from the kind of alright. They're going to struggle, so I wouldn't be too surprised if we start hearing that kind of rumor.
Yeah, I just looked it up as well. Challenger stage seems to start March 17th, so open quals will probably be at least 3 to 4 weeks before that. So
probably not much time to do it then. Yeah, you'd have to
coming out of the player break.
We'll see.
It'll be hard. It will be hard.
Yeah. We'll see.
You did kind of allude to the fact that I picked one of the last best sort of favorite teams that exists, and it's in the same group as Liquid. In fact, they play them in the opening round. I've chosen Virtus Pro. Now, I've always been a big fan of Jame and the system that he calls. As much as people may hate to watch it, I love that it's just so different versus everybody else. And people have taken a lot from his game into their own systems as well. His economic mindedness has seeped through
100%.
all of the cracks, and everybody hates Counter-Strike because of Jame.
It's all Jame's fault.
I feel like that's not the conversation is going. If Jame got removed tomorrow, people would rejoice, but also be like, but who are they getting instead? A very strong AWPer, has a good amount of talent, has a good rapport as far as sort of developing new talent. The integration of Mir, I think, was a bit of a question mark for me. Because I think a lot of times Mir is the omen of what's to come for rosters, even though he does usually perform quite well. And I don't like that they kicked Norbert, brought him back, kicked him again, and then brought him back again. We had an event, ESL Challenger Katowice, where he was saying, like, I am the permanent fifth, and he felt ill for a little bit. And, I'd heard rumors about Kickert fielding offers and yada, yada, yada. I think Kickert is a much more well-rounded player than Norbert. And like you get more out of him. He obviously understands the system. You know, he's maybe not as aggressive, but at times you actually do see him get very aggressive. So I didn't really see where that comparison came in because Kickert felt like a much more complete player than Norbert. But Norbert does have, I think, a higher ceiling if we're talking about just like raw entry ability. You know, the times that I've seen him set up with a flash or something taking space, he's actually done a very good job of it. I think this team will do just fine. Is kind of the angle I'm taking. I don't even think it'll be the traditional Virtus Pro. Oh, they play all 30 rounds of the game. Ha ha ha. I actually think they'll actually have a very convincing group stage in this tournament. Just because I believe the vision. You know, I don't always agree with James' decisions, but I believe in his vision for the game.
Yeah, I have some feelings about this roster because Mir.
Yeah.
Mir when he was on Spirit, I was thinking, wow, why can't this team do more? He's got such good numbers, and when you watch him play, he's really good. And then he was on Entropic, and you felt the exact same thing, like, wow, this guy's got really good numbers, and what else is this team missing? And everywhere he's gone, it's just not worked. It's just not worked. And you always hear stories of like, oh, he's actually uber toxic, and he's a massive problem for our team. I think, that kind of sucks, because I think he's really talented. And then you see him join Virtus Pro, you're like, oh crap, Virtus Pro finished. All right, Virtus Pro's done. If Mir's joining, but they've not collapsed so far.
No, they haven't.
And his numbers aren't too insane. So
and
perhaps,
it's not like he's sucking the life out of his other teammates as well, because that's usually what happens. It's like he joins, he looks great, and everybody else seems to deteriorate underneath him. But you know, Flit's still doing quite well. Fame's still doing quite well.
Yeah, we haven't had too many iconic Jane performances, but then again, when you scour the numbers, you rarely find iconic Jane performances, because even in the games where he actually had like all those key like 1v3s and stuff, he still ended the game 15 and 14 in a 36-round map. So you're kind of like, oh, his numbers don't look that crazy. Because he hasn't done anything for 25 of the 35 rounds. And then the other ones, he got a triple kill. He's a bit of a weird player, so maybe there's not much to think about in that sense, that Mir's actually slotted in nicely. I noticed in the stats, actually, I was going through them earlier, he's not absorbing a lot of opening attempts. He's actually way down with Jame at like the 16 mark, which is whatever, forgettable. This team their profile has shifted statistically from back when they were a Yakindar-dominated team. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform here. I don't think they're likely to get knocked out in this group. But them and Liquid are the two teams you'd look at to be like, hey, you are a favourite, but you could definitely lose a series to 9.
Yeah,
you could leave it too close against one of these underdog teams like Eternal Fire or Lynn Vision and potentially get like shocked in a 16-14 on a map you should never have let it go to because you're too cocky. Like, they are a team that can let that happen. So there's a lot to watch. They'll always be fun to me, at least. Even though the game may be slow, I think it'll always be fun. That's one thing for me. I've always liked Virtus Pro's crazy rotations, these weird ideas. These things have always been very entertaining on stream to watch. So I'll be watching their matches, and hopefully they'll make it through, because a good Virtus Pro for me it's just a good thing. Like, Jame rosters are fun when they're playing well.
A volatile favorite, but a favorite for me nonetheless.
That's a good way of putting it. But I think that wraps it up for the favorites. Now let's get into the always, I think, interesting section, which is the underdogs. Now, I've gone for a team I have actually been avidly following, which may shock some people because they are North American. Now, I've been a very vocal and I'd say effective NA hater. I've always made incredibly robust points about how terrible the region is. But M80 did something that I thought no one had the balls to do in North America, and they signed an actual talented player. Incredible. They went out, they got Manx from EU, who's a player as an individual I think is... Well, he's a Danish IGL, he's terrible. But he was brought up in the IGL system to end all IGLs. Like, the Bird from Sky system turns the IGL and two of the role players typically into such nonsensically shit players that exist just to die, that it's perfect for breeding more IGLs. And that's why I think this Manx signing was genius. He's calling for the team. He was calling briefly in some Danish roster or European roster before they scooted him along to NA. and that's really worked out. They've been outstanding in North America. That's been their first kind of idea in this roster. The other one was signing Malbs, who has been, if you look at if you take it like Central America and up, has been the most talented player still playing in NA for a long time, for a long, long time. He's absolutely insane. I think I had him on prospects 2 years ago. He's still only 20. He's just been sat there, wasting away. He was brought into the 00 Nation Latin American project, which was doomed from day one due to their lack of structure, poor implementation, and kind of integration of players. I mean, he's still got his numbers for the most part, but overall, the project wasn't fully realized in any significant way, so that ended up falling apart. But I think he's been genuinely wasted. In the 33 maps he's played with M80, his rating is 1.27. He's just absolutely smurfed the North American competition, even harder than he did the Brazilian competition. He's gone absolutely bananas. There's some other players on this team, but they have NA flags, so I don't really care to talk about them that much. But I give this org, M80, who apparently are a thing in other games, so much credit for actually going out and getting players who are actually risks, but I can really respect the philosophy and the reasons why they went and got them. I really love that.
Yeah, no, a very cool team. I remember when this was announced, I was kind of shocked. First off, never heard of M80, and then also that this was a team that, I could kind of see where they were going with it. I like the approach as well. I think you were kind of right to divert from one of your favorites to pick them as an underdog, because I probably would have snatched them up. The idea as well that Manx previously worked with Wolfie, I believe, for
he did
a small period
on that roster under Virgin Sky. Not a small period, a fairly significant period. Yeah. Back when Wolfie was still pretending to be Swedish.
Right.
Pretending.
Yes, of course.
It was his flag.
Yeah.
He is half and half.
But even if we ignore Malbs as an example, Swisher is also a North American player that has a lot of conversation around him because he's actually very talented. Actually seems like there's more to his game still yet to be developed, which is quite cool to see.
At 24 is pretty interesting as well,
yeah, he's got the mechanics of it, but obviously getting that more experience will be great. And yeah, I think they've just got a lot of firepower on this team. I always rated Wolfie to a certain degree as well, because it felt like, even though he was teed up for quite a lot of kills, he would still be sometimes put in some awkward spots where he actually would succeed, which I think is a nice little caveat to or I guess a little crevice to your game that can be quite problematic for other teams to deal with. So yeah, I find it very hard especially in North America, for teams to kind of put this squad away, because they've got quite a few weapons and quite a few young players that are probably just going to continue to develop moving into the next season. So yeah, a very cool roster, because it is some risk. It is definitely, but I like a lot of the players on this team, so I am biased.
Yeah, that's exactly why I picked them though. So I'm immensely biased towards a couple of the players, as I just want to see the Sword team succeed. I mean, if you look at their NA games, they've lost a best of 3 to Complexity, and they've lost a best of 1 to Forsaken, and that's about it since July. Yeah, that even includes some of July. So they've been really consistently performing. Is this a bit of a step up for them? Sure, but this is the group where you'd want to see your underdog pick play. They start off with a game against Apeks. Are you trying to tell me this Apeks is for sure better? I have a hard time imagining it. So I'm really comfortable with this pick. I think of all the rosters in this group who are likely to run the table up, upset the odds, I think they're securely in that conversation. And I think with Malbs plays the way he's been playing, they got a sneaky chance to make it out. So I'm loving it. But yeah, enough about M80, because I could keep talking all day and just run myself ragged. Who have you picked as your first underdog?
Well, I do this with some reluctance, but I also find it hard to ignore that Apeks do actually look quite good in some of their online officials, and even in some of their LAN showings. They show good potential out of the core of this roster. They've obviously made the transition and gotten Sasanito after having lost to JL. I am thinking about that right.
How do you say his name?
Sasanito. I don't know. I always like the idea of it being like Assassinito.
Ah, okay. I see what
But
you're
I know
doing.
it's like Kakanito. It probably is Kakanito.
Is
It's a
it?
bad habit that I developed just by casting him online and nobody ever correcting me.
I wouldn't want to be called Kakanito though, so
Yeah, no, that was
I have a hard
my
time with it.
yeah, that was the alternative. So it is unfortunate. But as a rifler independently, he can be quite good. He's also obviously worked with Kicksum before on the Blue Jays roster a long time ago
Yep.
before he even joined Apeks. They knew exactly who they were getting. They've also been able to get good performances out of players like Jacob, who I don't know how he still does it, but he still does it. He still
He's
has it.
eternal, that man.
Yeah, he's one of the most consistent, I think, unsuccessful players
Yeah, it's
of
one
all
way of
of
putting
all
it.
time. It's just strange because I always think he looks good on his rosters, but the rosters themselves don't look good. And I think this team just
Well,
have good upset potential. I just think Apex have very solid upset potential because I don't know that teams anticipate the way that this team is going to play. I feel like they come in with different game plans to each of their series, which makes them actually quite difficult to anti-strat if you're even going to think about anti-stratting Apex, for example.
yeah, I just Jacob for me, it's just no matter who he's playing for or playing against, he just gives you 0.73 kills per round, zero point 0.7 deaths per round, and you got to figure the rest of it out. Because he's just gonna over and over again. You can put him in all these duels over and over again. He'll win the majority of them, no matter how hard they are. And he does like that sort of legwork, and after that, you just got to figure out the rest of the game plan.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been doing it for so long. Like he was on the original G2 roster. He played in 100 Thieves when they were actually relevant. He's just never-endingly just doing the same thing. I've got to give him respect. How old is he now? Actually, like he's almost 30. He's 29. Yeah, he's been around a while, and to his credit, like he's looked. Yeah, as you say, he's looked good pretty much always. I think
it doesn't really seem like he's even like developed or changed his game over time. It's kind of just like you get the same thing from him and he does it really, really well.
It's pretty much the exact same thing. Like he'll take certain spots, usually very combative ones, and he'll win the majority of fights. Like he's not going to give you Nico numbers. He's not going to completely smash everything, but he's going to win enough fights for it to be positive for you. Like if you were like putting him on a value chart, like wins above replacement, he's not an MVP, but he's definitely in the positive. You want him on your roster, and the fact that he's done it the same way for all these years is comical at this point. It's comical. So yeah, I obviously don't think Apeks are going to be as good as M80 because they're head-to-head in the first game, and I picked M80. Like that's for me quite simple upset call. But I do think they are a fairly solid shout, especially considering the rest of that group. Well, if they go to the lower bracket, who are they facing? Like the loser of NAVI Cyclone. Yeah, they're betting favourites in that game.
Yeah,
let's put it that way. So they've got an interesting case to make, and I think the fact that they've been able to be so, I think, productive at so many events of late is credit to them. Like, sure, there's stuff that they could have done better. Like some online events, I watched them and I thought I wanted more. But recently they've been on a good streak. I think this I'm going to call him Cashinito. I think that signing has been fairly astute, like solid. And yeah, we'll see what they look like in this event. But no, another underdog from me. Weird that this team's an underdog, but when you look at it on paper, they are an underdog in this group, considering how many tier 1 events they attend and how well they actually perform at a lot of them, mostly through picking Vertigo, and that's 9, the Polish roster. I spent so much time kind of not dissing them, but expecting it to stop working, that I had lost some hope for this roster to take the next step. But the fact that they refuse to fuck off has been impressive. Like, it's been a testament to not only their calling, the depth of their map pool, but the fact that they are really good on one map, but then able to compete on quite a few others. It's just a testament to how well drilled and how well led they are. On top of that, Hades really coming to his own. I think after his period with OG, some people, I include myself for a little bit, thought maybe he wasn't ready, he was brought up too soon. Will we ever see him at this level again? And I think on this roster you've seen, yeah, he did have more to give. He had more development in him. This has been an amazing sort of stretch of time for him. And the depth of rifling behind it kind of weird because you think on paper it's like Key or K or Kai, it's Kylar, and it's Goofy. You're like, wait, these three guys are all kind of stars in their own right on their teams, like before they're on this roster. And then Minio, who on average isn't great, but has maps on, especially Vertigo, where he just bangs heads like he's just playing warm-up DM. It's kind of an odd roster to look at. When you think about playing against them, you're like, any of these guys could at any given moment triple kill, hit all the headshots, open up the bomb site, and we're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a difficult team to play against. You know what you're going to get. It's one of those ones where you know what they're going to do. You know what they're going to call, sort of how they're going to approach the game. But you can't do much about it. And I think that's a testament to how well they execute.
Can I make a minor correction? I think you said OG, limited time for Hades on OG. I think you meant ENTs or Finest, maybe?
I definitely meant ENTs.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
in my head, Polish Orpa, I think I went to Mantu.
Yeah,
rather than Hades.
That
they
is
have
fair.
the same conversation with both, I'm going to be honest.
Yes, exactly. Now, I thought it was strange because Nine obviously had that really, really solid start to the year, kind of similar to like Aurora and I'm trying to think who else. There was another team, might have been Monty, but they've kind of just been able to stick around. And I think the reason they've been able to do that is because they just had a good structure. They had good play. Like it felt like all the players, there was like no communication hitches whatsoever. This was actually a return for Hades to some of his old teammates from a long, long time ago. I even forget what roster that was, but trust me, they've played together.
It's probably some AGO or something, right?
It was
or Vizsla Krakow.
I think it was Vizsla Krakow.
Yeah, he played with Goofy on that team for sure.
Yeah. So it was just nice that this team kind of hit the ground running when they brought in Hades. Kind of in contrast to say someone like Lucky, who went back to Tricked, for example, where that organization just kind of imploded very quickly afterwards.
It did, unfortunately, yeah.
But yeah, the team is quite good. I think the transition to LAN has been quite a struggle for them because their online results and the way they play online looks great. But they've attended quite a lot of tier 1 events, but I actually do think they've kind of lost some of the spark that you see in their online officials, where you'll actually get these like crazy rounds from players like Goofy or Kylar or even Hades, where he just kind of takes over rounds. It feels like it has to be more fire by committee to win any of these games, and it feels like someone always has a rough game in these LAN showings. So I don't know if that's just the environment, or they think they need to change their game in some capacity, or maybe the teams are actually just doing a good job of negating some of these players and targeting them so that the plans that they come up with in the mid round aren't as successful. And they're kind of like a small Heroic, but right now Heroic aren't looking too hot either.
Yeah,
I like this team, but I do think they will still struggle here in the group. I think it's something to do with the environment. I don't know how they combat it, if it's just grinding it out, kind of attuned to early Gambit. Just the more they do it, the better they should become. But
sure.
Yeah, I think this year is kind of a testing period for them.
Yeah, but the great thing is when you talk about them, when you predict them, they're going to be solid on Vertigo. Then they'll probably win it in overtime if they win it at all against a good team. Then they'll give you a good shot on Mirage, on Overpass, on Anubis, on some of these other maps. So that's why I like them as a true underdog pick, not just a team who are bad, who I like talking about. They're a true underdog sort of dark horse in this sense. So yeah, curious to see what sort of level they bring. Very curious.
Right. I think that's totally reasonable. And another team that we're going to put in the underdog category, because they are quite truly an underdog, even though they are the top of the NA region by default, I have chosen Complexity. I always appreciate it. I like the move that they were able to snatch up Elige, even though there might have been some history between Grim and Elige at one point. I don't know if that was all amicable. But with that said, Elige does look quite strong on this roster. He is taking quite a lot of ownership in rounds. Feels like he is not only able to sometimes hunt for opening duels, but he's also closing some rounds for them. That, and you've still got players around him that seem to be doing quite well. I think Holzerk is in a bit of a precarious spot because he's not quite putting out AWPing numbers, but he is still, getting his kind of one frag around with the AWP, which can sometimes be enough. I think there's a lot of scrutiny around the calling of this team, and I think Elish has improved it slightly. In fact, quite a few competitive series. I do think losing to OG, God, what was that? That was at the play-in stage, wasn't it?
There's the play in a Cologne, yeah.
Of Cologne, yeah. That one's kind of rough because I just do not rate this OG roster currently. But I don't know. I really liked the approach that Complexity were able to get one of the big three or big stars out of Liquid and snatch them up for themselves and maintain that they're a full North American organization, bar JT, and Holzerk, who, they've
those two players
immigrated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Indeed.
If we ignore those little blips on the
They've
radar,
kept the core. They've kept the core American.
Yeah, they're still playing the NA RMR, which is what matters, really. Which is great for them. I agree there's things to like about the Elish signing. I mean, sure, the reason they're able to sign him is because he's at an all-time low in his career and has, in Tier 1, never looked worse. In NA competition, not been an issue. And in some of the games they've played in the EU, he's been their best player, which you'd expect from the guy who's done it before, who's actually been at that level consistently throughout his entire career. But man, I was always... My pick of the team, of the guys I was rooting for more than anything, because I saw so much potential, was Fang. And the guys that are left don't magically get good. I'm start asking for a lot of changes, because for a start, I've not liked JT's use of his star players for a while. I think Holzerk skates by on basically nothing. I mean, he's on water right now, but still wearing ice skates, and someone's holding him up. He's not afloat. He's just not good enough. So I think there's more change to be made for this team to ever be really competitive. They can cruise on as the #1 team in NA for now. As MAT keep getting better, that won't last. So I think they've got more questions to answer in the future. At this event, how do I like their odds? Because they're in Group D. That's the tougher group. You'll have to go through a team like Liquid Virtus Pro to make it out of the lower bracket. Maybe even have to get through the last chance. Even then, you'll still probably have to face someone like that who's relatively competent. So I like the rest of the underdog picks. I don't think they've got a particularly great chance in Group D. And I think there's a lot of roster moves needed. A lot. Two roster moves before they're competitive. And I'm not sure they can do that staying NA. So it's an interesting dilemma to solve. Maybe CS2's release will boost CSGO popularity in North America. Will save that continent from its decline into depravity. But for now, yeah, it's rough. It's just rough overall. Let's move on to the final underdog picks, because we go on to the opposite of North America. A region that's going from the bottom of the dumps to being fun and interesting and competitive and, honestly, with plenty of talent to talk about. That's the most important thing. So I've picked my final underdog 5Y Clone, or Cyclone if you're feeling hip and cool. They are a Chinese team. You'll know them as Rare Atom. I'll save the... they're basically just Rare Atom.
Yeah.
I don't think anything's changed, has it, from the Rare Atom roster? But it's just a full-on transfer of orgs, if this even is a new org.
I believe it is a new org, yeah.
I don't keep as up to date as I should, really, on that
sort of stuff. The logo is too well designed for it to just be a random thing. But I do think it is strange. I can't find them on Facebook, or I couldn't even find a Weibo or something. So it must be a brand new venture, and maybe this is purely angled at CS2. They've launched the organization.
But yeah, they've got a kind of classic sort of composition. IGL, who's been here a while. I've known the name Advent for, it feels like, years. How old is he? 31. That explains a lot. He's been here a long time in the Asian scene, if you've been paying any sort of attention. And he's quite a veteran caller. Sure, that means he also puts up veteran numbers. His rating is sub 0.9, I believe, which is pretty abysmal. But he's got 4 star players basically surrounding him. Kaze or Kaze is the most experienced of them all. Oh my god, he's 29. I just opened his page. I didn't realize he was 29. I know he's a name we've all known for a while. He's not a new guy to the scene. He's been at it for a long time in Asian mixes, because he's from Malaysia. Pure Malaysian teams don't really thrive, so he's had to move out of that. But the rest of these guys, Jamyoung, Mercury, Moseo, these guys all look incredible. I think two of them, I think Mercy and Mercury were found in like Base-It in Asia or something equivalent to
5e Pugs, which is the Chinese equivalent. So
yeah, and they've been absolutely bonkers in Asian competition. The few games they've played in EU, they were at the last Pro League, I believe, and they played one other event that was online. The results weren't really there, but you saw potential. You saw guys like Mercury, like Mosley, actually be competitive with EU competition, and that's great to see. So I'm picking these guys just to talk about them. Really, I wouldn't put a penny on them getting out of the group, but I want to see development, improvement, and come CS2, and hopefully we see some amount of growth from the Asian, mostly Chinese Mongolian scene at this point, because we lost the rest of Valorant. But hopefully we see more development from those two sort of countries and see some more flourishing competition outside of EU and the CIS come CS2. I think that's a cool team to keep an eye on. Some young up-and-coming players.
Yeah, I think they're a cool organization, or a good team, rather. I did actually just look up. Apparently, the organization is non-existent, and apparently on Wikipedia, they are listed as organization-less, so ignore everything that I said. Apparently,
they've got a cool graphic designer friend.
Yeah, they just hired somebody real quick, and they banged one out, probably on the cheap. Either way, I mean, basically everybody on this team, bar Kaze, has lived under Advent for their whole careers. Jamyoung was scouted in much kind of a similar way. He has been a career man under Advent's leadership. Same with Mercury Mosea as the newer additions. Jamyoung was the talk of all Asian Counter-Strike for a while because he was such a gifted rifler and like miles better than anybody, any of his competition within the region. That it's kind of staggering and weird to think that when they've actually faced in international waters, Jamyoung isn't actually the talk. Like, he's not the one that we're fixated on because it is these new guys that seem to interchangeably do quite well and even overshadow Jamyoung, which it's crazy because he's still quite a young guy. He's still got the mechanics, but these guys are taking more initiative in rounds because Jamyoung's more like a lurking style player. And it kind of just fits quite well. So yeah, I like Cyclone. I have for a little bit. I think they've had a little bit of a rough performance recently, even domestically. Like, they didn't qualify for Sydney, for example.
Those qualifiers are rough, aren't they? Only one spot.
Yeah.
There's like three Asia region teams, right, who are always competing for that one slot. It's brutal out there. It's really cutthroat.
They didn't make Blast. They didn't make Sydney. So yeah, there's more to be desired. Maybe that's just the period that they're in because of the recent organizationlessness, and maybe they're having to do some more back end lifting. You'd hope Cammy, their coach, is probably fronting that, but honestly, who knows? A lot of these teams, it's hard to actually get a feeler out for them. The team that they have been losing to quite frequently and did lose their Sydney spot because of them is the team I've picked as my last underdog, and they reside in a separate group because the Asian teams can't be in the same group. God bless. Lynn Vision, I've chosen, and they have G2 in the first round. Now, I'm not saying...
If you know, you know.
Yeah, I'm not saying it will happen, but... last time Lynn Vision played against G2 in a surprise matchup, there was quite a surprise in store for G2. The Lynn Vision team are one that people domestically, I think, have kind of touted as being chokers, or some even throw around the term land dodgers, because every time they get to the end of qualifiers or the end of these tournaments that will put them into like another big tournament afterwards, they seem to have a massive choking problem. Like, they wouldn't play the same type of game, players would go missing, calling would be all out of whack. It got so bad that the in-game leader, the previous in-game leader of this team before Westmelon took over, X-Pro, actually put out a post and sort of soft retired to take a break because they kept underperforming. It was kept disappointment after disappointment. They never took that next step. And then when they replace him, they qualify for ESL Pro League. They're in IEM Sydney. They've made it to they haven't made it to the last full showdown, but they've got these two international tournaments to look forward to, and they're in that Premier Asia Cup thing, I think, like the Perfect World thing that's happening in China quite soon. So they've got quite a lot to look forward to, and it's honestly just really nice to see them make these opportunities, because I want to see what they'll do against EU teams now. Again, like, they had that one showdown, and then it was kind of just nothing else. So yeah, I'm rooting for them. I feel like they've got a lot of talent on the roster, even on players that are just kind of brand new to the scene. Like Amelia, nobody really knew much about before he joined the squad. And G hadn't been on too many sort of heavy hitting rosters beforehand, and they just look good. Also, Westmelon, in-game leader fragger, that guy still cooks. You know, his teammates die, he still cooks.
Okay, I was about to actually bring that up because I wasn't sure who was leading now. If Xpro was the guy, one of the guys being
He's
replaced.
the oldest man on the team at 22 years old.
Yeah, this roster's young. This is, if you look at their pictures actually on HLTV, you think like this is some kind of B-Tech like pop band from Asia. Like these guys are all like so fresh faced with the floppy hair. Like this could be some sort of K-pop, J-pop group. Like if you told me it was, like sure they just wear weird jerseys instead of like cool, slick suits and stuff. Like you could have fooled me. These guys are all really young. I've been a fan of Starry ever since that famous series against G2, where he just flexed his muscles. Like he actually like showed up for, what was he, like 17, 16 at the time?
Yep.
He went, yeah, have it. Like he hit some crazy shots. He put up some not insane numbers. I think he ends the series like not much above a 1.0 rating. But considering
he 1v5 them on a pistol round.
Exactly, 1v5 them on a pistol round. He had some other really good like just rounds overall. So I think that was a really, really good performance. And you saw them actually, they played some EU Tier 2 kind of stuff just afterwards for about 2 to 3 months, I believe. And in that time, they weren't transcendent, but they beat the shit EU Tier 2 teams that the good EU Tier 2 teams usually beat, right? They did the sort of stuff you're like, okay, then they're actually at a decent level relative to EU. They didn't come over and get battered like some low-level NA sides do, where they come over, stay for a while, and just get slogged online by Bulgarian 5-stacks and go home sad. There wasn't actually that sort of situation playing out for them, so they were actually quite impressive. So I'm curious to see what they do, because now that I think about it, tactically they might have been the better pick. No, never mind. They're in Group D. I forgot. Yeah, they're in Group D. They're the worst pick. Sorry, never mind.
Yeah,
I nailed it.
I was thinking actually tactically Cyclone. You know, maybe have a better chance.
Cyclone the better picks. Even though they Cyclone maybe lose the online qualifier to Lynn Vision, Cyclone don't have to play the same level of teams, I think, in Group C that Lynn Vision do in Group D. But hey, if they can bring that kind of plucky attitude that they did at the last time they were in EU, they've got a chance. As much as anyone else, they've got a chance. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Maybe we'll get even better performances from these young guys.
Yeah, I think it's just important to note at the moment there might be a bit of a shift. You know, the Mongols aren't quite the team they used to be anymore. Cyclone were kind of the next in line behind them. And right now, Lynn are looking just better than either of those two teams. So it's kind of refreshing that there's another name, because we had Wings Up have a surprise at like Challenger Melbourne in like 2022 against OG, which was a very, very weird series, but a very entertaining one for any HSCS fans. And yeah, you know, it's nice to have another name kind of show what they got on the international stage instead. So I think Lynn are the better team of any of the teams in the region at the moment, but they also have the least amount of experience and are the youngest. And you know, there's a lot of different angles you could take. There's growth to be had.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think, on that side of things, there's a few teams in this group, on these two groups, that make me just more invested, because the shit teams in Group A and B, I don't want to watch. I have no interest in watching Evil Geniuses lose 2-0 to people. I have no interest in watching Rooster. But give me some Asian CS, give me M80, I'm down. I'll watch those games. So Group C and D, maybe if you truly did some like balanced analytical approach, you'd say probably just as competitive as A and B. Maybe Group D has got an edge on every other group. But I'm far more interested in watching these matches. These matches seem far more hyped, I guess. Hype is the word. They're just more hype for me. I mean, it's a shame I'm going to have to sit through some like 30-year-old dudes playing ping pong in drogging bottoms whilst I do so. That's a thing now. But yeah, I'm willing to watch this group. These groups look like a lot of fun.
Hey man, when you have to fill for hour-and-a-half segments, you know,
give me a countdown and some crappy EDM. I don't want to watch these guys.
No, I mean, you can do that. You know, the games aren't being pushed forward. You could take that hour-and-a-half off if you want. Just put on your own EDM and move on with your life. It's just there's a lot of fill time. So yeah, there's quite a lot of fluff. There is quite a lot of fluff.
Oh, it's just such a weird event to have as your flagship as ESL, but whatever. That's their creative decision, not mine. Hopefully the games are good, and we can all enjoy some great Counter-Strike. But yeah, that'll be all for the video. We've just clocked over an hour, So, good time to wrap it all up. I'm going to get the polls up because I forgot to do that for Group A and B. It's a busy life. People are taking summer holidays. I was working a double essentially all summer. So let's get the polls up, get people voting, and get some actual good points in for us.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Are they still winning? Are they still winning?
Of course they're still winning. They were up by quite a distance, and then I forgot to put the polls out, so they just get points by default. So they're winning by like 10. Maybe more. We'll see. We'll see after this next pair of groups. We're not doing well. At least 1v1, I'm still winning.
For now.
By 1 point. There's not much in it. The more interesting conversation is me v you still. The viewers are long
They
gone.
have no forfeits. They lose nothing if they lose.
No, that's true. That's true.
They gain nothing if they win too. Like, how would we even distribute a prize? No one.
There's no prize for it. It's just if they win, we both donate. At this point, we're donating, man. There's not enough. I don't think there's enough events unless they royally cock up their vote for these groups. I think we're done. We're screwed.
Yeah, probably.
So yeah, goodbye money. You're welcome, charities. All right. We'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.